component, it is made unitary. So the weakening of the economic aspect of federalism is akin to cutting off the limbs of an animal. Having been amputated, the animal can neither walk nor work effectively. As a result, states get lazy about developing and depending on internally generated revenue and neglect diversification of their revenues. This behavior is a variant of resource costs generated in a disjointed federal system like Nigeria. Of course, you know, for oil-rich countries, you have the various resource costs. The resource costs like the Dutch disease and all that, where your exports become more competitive, and therefore you start depending on import because your currency gets strong, because you are getting a lot of foreign currency from exporting the oil resources, gas, and other materials. But we are saying, based on what we have just said, it seems that there is another type of disease from our resources that is, Nigeria is a good example. And we shall name this disease amputation effect, because it is the result of an amputated federalism. An amputated federalism is a federalism where you have federal structures politically. Then when it comes to the economic aspect, you make it a unitary system. So you have amputated the federalism. It doesn't have the limbs to work, because the economy is the limb for the economy to work. So you have a federal structure where you say, look, you have governors, you have states, you cater for your states. Then when it comes to resources and revenue, everybody comes to the center to collect. So when it comes to politics, it is federalism. When it comes to the economy, it is unitary. So it's an amputated federalism, and that's a disease that is resulting from the way we look at oil resources. In essence, it will be noted that there is asymmetry in Nigeria's federal system. While the political arrangement is federalism, the economic arrangement is essentially unitary. Therefore, from the perspective of the nature of Nigerian federalism, the economy is not diversified. The unitary arrangement in the conceptualization and management of Nigeria's economy, particularly oil, is a major factor inhibiting economic diversification. Therefore, a strategy that pushes massive infrastructure development for achieving effective diversification springing from the constituent units is good for building a vibrant, stable, and progressive federal nation. That's my emphasis. Let me say that again. A strategy that pushes massive infrastructure development for achieving effective diversification, springing from the constituent units, is good for building a vibrant, stable, and progressive federation and nation. Infrastructure development is good for the building of a politically sustainable nation. It is good for making political restructuring acceptable because, as noted earlier in this session, it will make the constituent units less apprehensive of a future where dependence on oil revenue is not the basis for fiscal viability. So what is the want of big infrastructure? How does big infrastructure do the magic? Our thesis is, therefore, that the most effective approach to addressing Nigeria's socio-economic development deficit is to frontally address its infrastructure deficit with rapid and massive investment in infrastructure. What is required is not the mere enhancement, which is what the Honorable said. What is required is not the mere enhancement of budgetary allocation to infrastructure, because this will not create the degree of momentum needed, given the depth of the hole that needs to be filled. What is required is a bold and creative initiative, not only to cover decades of areas of what ought to have been achieved, but also to meet up with the ever-advancing target of peers and other groups of countries on the global stage, because the target is moving. It's not like other countries are relaxing so that we can catch up. So even before we fill the gap, people have moved to a new target. So that shows you that what you must do cannot be ordinary. It has to be extraordinary. For example, in terms of electricity, Nigeria's current electricity need is more than 12,000 megawatts, but the actual supply has been hovering below 5,000 megawatts in the past 5 years, even though the installed generation capacity is about 12,500 megawatts. And the electricity assets ratio is about 45%. Compare this with South Africa's current power supply of over 51,000 megawatts and assets ratio of about 86%. In terms of overall economic wealth, according to the World Bank 2016 data, Nigeria's per capita income was about $2,180. Compare this with South Africa's $5,316. Why am I saying this? This means that even if Nigeria's GDP, that is output, is shared equitably among all of us, we will all still be relatively poor compared to our South African counterparts to sufficiently address its infrastructure deficit. This is the total amount to be provided from a variety of public and private sector sources. According to the plan, which provides the roadmap for building, quote, a world-class infrastructure that will guarantee sustainable economic growth and development, unquote, out of the total investment required over the 30 years, 52% of that will be provided by the government and 48% by the private sector. It also identifies 4 major options for financing government's share of the needed investment. 1, government budgets. 2, government debt. 3, other government control sources such as sovereign wealth fund. And finally, pension funds. Distinguished engagement, the problem is that as regards the planned private sector contribution, the public sector will need to encourage the private sector as well as through PPP and other measures, including through the use of incentives and enhancements. For example, provision of sovereign guarantees. Such supports would be almost imperative where the private sector shows interest in investing in infrastructure and mega industrial projects that would ordinarily be provided by the public sector. However, there is a high degree of uncertainty, and that's where the problem is, when it comes to the quantum and the speed of private sector investment. You can provide a quota of what the private sector will provide, give them all the incentives, but there's uncertainty. They will do it when they want to do, how they want to do it, based on their own perceptions, based on their own sensibilities. Therefore, the onus of predictable, if you want it to be predictable, the onus of predictable outcomes lies with the public sector and requires it to proactively lead and implement its share of the responsibility. Indeed, it is our view that sustained implementation of the government's part of the investment plan would inspire the private sector to play its own role. Regarding the plausible strategy for financing the public sector contribution, the intriguing conclusion, and that's intriguing, the intriguing conclusion is that given the existing resource constraints facing the country, that the government has no money, that's the big grammar there. Given that government has no money, the well-acknowledged lack of domestic fiscal space, the plausible source of greater proportion of the public capital injection is external borrowing. I hope we are following. We're already getting into trouble. Okay? We are narrowing down to say, given that government has no money, as has been said by the Honorable, the budgetary resources are not adequate, cannot be adequate. So how does government fund its own component of the master plan to the tune of 52%? So we are saying, we are coming to the conclusion that it had to be funded mainly from external borrowing. And so we're now going into the problems. We need to look at this proposition more closely so we can move logically to that conclusion. The first is, why borrow? Why do you borrow in the first instance? The logic is simple. One, the Nigeria's infrastructure development is an enormous task, given the size of the problem and the country's dire fiscal condition. Even at that, all that is required is to proceed a little beyond the conventional space usually explored by experts, to explore and provide an intelligent and relatively unorthodox solution. This should be guided by the Igbo proverb, which states that there's an Igbo proverb that has the solution to all this problem. And what does it say? I'll quote it in English. Okay. Okay. And what does that mean? Quote, the coconut always comes along with the rope with which it can be lifted. When you go and pluck a coconut, you go and push it down. Come down for you to lift it. You see, it already has a rope. You don't need to carry the bulk. There's a rope on top. The wisdom is that often a good solution to a problem is embedded in the problem itself. Accordingly, in spite of the country's problematic debt profile, a plan-based, project-tied, output-driven, commercially modeled, and private sector managed debt program remains a robust option, arguably the most robust option for financing the solution for Nigeria's infrastructure development. It is a solution that can be structured to produce a transformed and self-sustaining economy without worsening the debt sustainability. Indeed, it has the capacity to bail out existing debt unsustainability while improving long-run debt sustainability. Accordingly, and importantly, such a plan-based solution can be readily marketed to a diverse universe of investors and development partners, while enjoying the positive consideration of all stakeholders, including the Nigerian public. Mr. Chairman of this event, the President of JustFriends Club, respected panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, including those of the media, I want to thank you immensely.
Thank you.
Exciting to say that Dr. Nwankwo has been unflappable, and we are not surprised. If you know Dr. Nwankwo well and you know his antecedents, you know that he has delivered a paper from the heart. He has spent time, he has done his research, and therefore he has delivered on all fronts for all of us to take home. A lot of the things that were said pretty much encapsulates the fact that we all should be thinking in the direction of debt to service infrastructure. Bottom line. For me, what I took away from it is private-public sector partnership. I also took away from it the issue of focus. I also took away from it the issue of efficiency and the issue of idle capacity. It's very difficult to find any nation like Nigeria that is so well endowed. When I travel often, one of my favorite fruits is mango. I end up buying mango for £1. On my way to my village, I buy the whole basket for £1. And that is an area of field that Nigerians must take on board. Idle capacity. There's just so much. And I worry when I travel and I find, only recently I was in Malta, and I was very surprised to see the looks that I was receiving. those looks suggested that I probably jumped ship from an immigration boat that was going somewhere. Because Malta does not have many Africans. And so I stuck out like a sore thumb. And I found, to my greatest shock, that everybody had a look. And I kind of like, it just occurred to me that the black people that they see are often people who have drowned, people who have fallen off a boat. And therefore I looked like one of them, clearly. So what are we saying? We are saying that what we need to develop Nigeria is inside Nigeria. And that the only thing we need is a little bit of injection from outside to help us push what Dr. Nwankwo described as the big push. But the other side of the question for me will be looking inwards to those things that undo us. Those things that make us that nation where we're not looking at when we have the implementation plan. Those things that already unnerve us as a people. Time consciousness. Time consciousness. The issue of when you plan a project, the project implementation plan from the beginning, has it been looked at in a manner as to where this project will do well? Or is it about who is my brother? And if my brother is involved, perhaps it will do well. In the meantime, when you're planning and you're doing project implementation, if you don't look at what it is that will help you yield the best results, you've already started on a bad footing. So what is our plan in terms of, is my brother qualified? Why should it be my brother? Who is the most qualified person? And why are we not pursuing it in that direction? Those are issues that we should look at. The other issue is, who are we carrying along? How are young people? How are they functioning today? Do they have delayed gratification? Are they looking at it from the perspective of the long term? Or are they looking at the project today, now, the money, my pocket? Those are the issues for me that surround this big issue and the big push. And if we don't look at those areas, we will go a borrowing and then we'll go a sorrowing. Finally, I think it is critical that while we're looking at this big picture and looking at how, if we do not invest $100 billion per annum for 30 years for us to get out of our infrastructural deficit, we must also look at our maintenance culture. Our maintenance culture as a people is abysmal. Simple things we don't maintain. We just create a new one. And if you are not maintaining your infrastructure, where are we going with this? Because maintenance is critical. And we heard from most of the speakers earlier today that you can sustain somebody on a job just by paying him to maintain, what you already have. A new government comes up and he says, can we just scrap that one that was there before? Can we just build another one so that my brother can benefit? I think it's an important area of field that we should look at these things. How did our forebears manage maintenance culture? How did we manage looking at projects? How was corruption involved? Because it's difficult to run away from those issues. When you go borrowing and you go marrying and buying new cars, how are you going to sustain this matter? And I think it's critical that we must take a look at it. Only recently, while I was still executive director at NTA, we were building studios by Chinese. A brand new studio was being built by some soft loan taken from the Chinese. I was not in charge of engineering, but I was concerned that our young engineers did not pay any heed to the building of this studio. Because if the studio is being built by Chinese, and every day they arrive at NTA in the morning, and they walk around the place, and they're building the studio, I kept going to the studio to see how they were padding the walls, and I was saying to myself, maybe one day I might build a studio, let me go see what they're doing, so that I will have an understanding when they're getting the job done. But half of our engineers, I would say, why are you not there? Why is there no roll call of people who went into that place to learn how the studio was being built? A matter for us to chew on, because we cannot continue to rely on foreign engineering, foreign skills, without our people paying attention. After a while, China shut down its gates and grew its nation. How long will it take us to understand that the French, the English will not come to rescue us? This is our nation. Running away will not solve the problem.
On both sides understands how important infrastructure is to economic development. It's well established and and we also know that when we compare Nigeria with other countries, by whatever statistics, either in terms of physical infrastructure, in terms of access to power, capital control, any indices of development, Nigeria usually is at the bottom. So we need massive, huge investment in order to bring up our country if we aspire to become among the top 20 countries in the world. And our population too is increasing. In the next 30 years, Nigeria will be maybe among the 3 or 5 top most populous countries in the world. And so how do we now provide job opportunities for our children? Even as of now, we have massive employment. And all the issues we have about insecurity, about restiveness, when you do a root cause analysis, it goes back to this frustration and abject poverty in the land. So what I would suggest, and in terms of, you highlighted very serious issues that needs to be considered seriously. We talked about the lack of proper fiscal regulation, even though we have a political regulation. And there's need to find a model to harness the resources of each of the regions based on their natural endowment in order to propel the economy to a higher growth and productivity, which is true. What I would suggest is maybe we need to look at the model of creating special economic zones, because a number of countries in Southeast Asia, even China itself, leveraged on those especially because you cannot provide infrastructure everywhere as you go, but you can provide infrastructure in pockets or places that can now be the center points to galvanize higher economic activities. China did that after the reformists came to power after the death of Mao, 76. And within 30 years, China has become the second most formidable, second largest economy in the world, and they are still growing. It was posting growth rate of 10%, 11%, which was unprecedented in the history of economies. That is one. Two, my only point of departure with you is in terms of, you seem to suggest that public borrowing should be the mechanisms through which you can. Yeah, there are various sources of raising funds. You can sell assets, but that one cannot give you the quantum of resources you need. You can also borrow, but I don't think Nigeria as it stands can borrow, has the credit worthiness to borrow the amount of quantum of amount required. We are talking of $100 billion every year. $100 billion is not a small amount. So what I would suggest is, yeah, we need all these other sources. There's also the issue of land redevelopment in terms of, substituting land of the subprime facilities to another place so that you can now develop the prime land and then get the value from the land, apart from the land capture issue you mentioned. But to me, I should think, and Chief Minister, he also tries to support me, I think the best way to handle this is through a public-private structured, public-private partnership. And the way it works is once you allocate the assets, but before you do that in Nigeria, we need to address the challenges that will give comfort to an investor, because it's going to be a long-term investment. You're going to, if anything jeopardizes investment, then investors, you will have serious investors of the caliber required to come and invest. So we need to address in terms of our legal regulatory framework, in terms of even our judicial system, where you have commercial dispute and take 10 years to resolve, all these things, affect the caliber of investors we get. But once we get the legal and regulatory framework in place that encourages investors, then and fair investors will come. And then how we can now prioritize our assets. There are assets, as mentioned by the chairman of the House Committee for Works. There are assets that can be handled by private sector. There are roads we can identify that can be maintained, rehabilitated, maintained, operated by private sector for a period of time. And they will be recovering their money back either from mineral charges and or a combination of that and unitary payment by government. So I think that should have been our main vehicle of tracking our deficit in the infrastructure, PPPs, rather than public borrowing. Thank you.
Which we used in testing the Swiss challenge method of procurement was actually done with the DMO project, in which it was an unsolicited proposal, and then we used that to introduce competition using one of the methods recommended by the World Bank. And then that project forced the initial cost down by over 10 billion naira. I think we should plan for the DG. Also, a few years back, if you recall, the government set up a plan with the development of the Southeast Road using the Sukuk funds. I want to announce that in 2011, I was part of a committee that worked with him, including the chairman, where we took a study of Sukuk financing, how government can get alternative funds from Islamic financial instruments, which is Sukuk. And at that time, we said it was a way to look. Now, 7 years after, the government has done something, and they realized over 100 billion, I think it's a billion or 100 billion naira, which will now be used in development of infrastructure. So, coming back to and of course, recently we've been looking at how do we, get advocacy groups to be able to speak, to champion PPPs and all that. I think JustFriends Club of Nigeria will play that role very well, especially with the kind of mandate that is being pursued here. The summary of it is that PPPs remain the way to go. The infrastructure deficit is not getting smaller, it's getting widened by the day. The 48% of the requirements of the annual 100 billion naira recommended by the new document is expected to come from the private sector. And by private sector, we are saying, how do we interact with the private sector? How do we create an enabling environment to attract them? How does the government themselves incentivize their businesses and provide all manner of methods? The paper has talked about guarantees. A few years back, each time we talk about guarantees, even the government agencies are not ready to give guarantees. But I'm happy that this paper has highly recommended that government should give guarantees. Recently we closed the deal of about $3.9 billion for a standard gauge rail from Warri to Abuja Road, ending up with the ports. That was also done through a government guarantee, but at the back of which we had a performance bond back to back to ensure that there was guarantee for operations to repay the loan. So the private sector, the public sector must come together to attract funds that will be used in development of infrastructure. The other aspect to look at is to say, look, we must build capacity. A friend of mine who works in the bank once told me that, look, most Nigerians cannot develop simple proposals. That the funds are there. Ask the Nigerian to do a feasibility study. That's the end of that idea. So we must begin to develop capacity on how to develop proposals and move this country forward. Recently also, through the ICRC, we worked on the SME portal. The SME portal is a classical example of setting up infrastructure that will further bring down the cost of production, the cost of business transactions in the country. And how was that done? Was a simple approach where instead of allowing SMEs to have their own platforms, we simply allow the government agency to set up one platform, then they can all tap into it and then bring their products to market and get things done as quickly as possible. So I think this paper well addresses those issues. We must borrow, but in risk management, we look at calculated risk. We take risks that we can adequately manage and mitigate and allocate where necessary. PPPs, like my DG will always say, that PPP stand for preparation, preparation, preparation. We agree with your point that we must plan. So we expect that we must plan our infrastructure, we must plan to develop our infrastructure. When we go into infrastructure development and we go into contract, we do not do that because we expect that the multiplier effect with the economic growth. It should actually run side by side. So I agree also with your position on that, that we need to do things to move things as fast as possible. So in the final analysis, I think to a very large extent, the paper was well researched, well thought out. Your points were well marshaled out. You take a very strong position about borrowing. In PPPs, generally, it is not the government that is expected to borrow. So the risk from borrowing does not necessarily fall on government. The approach we would have looked at is to say, look, an SPV will be set up. The SPV now becomes the borrower of the financing. So the lenders will lend to the SPV, and then the SPV becomes responsible to collect the user fees and all manner of income, and then settles. So it shields the government entity from that risk. So the SPV approach remains very, very, very applicable, especially when we look at PPPs. And then PPPs also have also the opportunity of risk sharing. So the government does not carry the burden of risk for which it's not able to effectively manage. So PPP remains a force to reckon with if we must close up our infrastructure gap in Nigeria. I'll stop at this point. Thank you very much.
The very strong recommendation of Dr. Nwankwo, and we could do a modification which is around debt financing. I think he made it very clear that borrowing